Alexander Pushkin, The Life of a Great Poet. Chapter 1. A Child of Russia. The wind howled through the narrow streets of Moscow on a cold June night in 1799, when a baby boy's cry filled the modest home of the Pushkin family. This child, Aleksandr Sergeyevich Pushkin, would one day become Russia's greatest poet. But for now, he was just a boy with a curious mind and an extraordinary destiny. Born into a family with a rich but complex history, young Alexander's childhood was far from ordinary. His father, Sergey, was a nobleman who adored literature, filling their home with books from across Europe. But it was Alexander's mother, Nadezhda, with her deep African roots through her grandfather, Abram Ganabal, who brought an exotic richness to the family. Ganabal, once a child slave, had risen to become a general in the Russian army. These stories of struggle, honor, and pride were whispered to young Alexander by his mother, planting the seeds of inspiration in his restless heart. As a young boy, Alexander spent his days exploring his family's estate, lost in the imaginary worlds created by his beloved books. His grandmother, Maria, a woman of traditional values, would tell him stories of Russian folklore, tales of witches, magical creatures, and forgotten heroes. His eyes sparkled as these stories ignited his imagination. At 12, his world changed forever when he was sent to the Imperial Lyceum at Tsarskoye Selo, where the first sparks of his genius would begin to flicker. Chapter 2. The Awakening of a Poet. The grand walls of the Imperial Lyceum were intimidating, but to young Pushkin, they were a gateway to greatness. Inside these halls, Pushkin found a new family, his classmates, who, like him, dreamed of changing the world. The Lyceum was a place where minds were free to wander, where discussions about literature, art, and philosophy filled the air. It was here that Pushkin would begin to craft his first poems. Each stroke of his pen was a step toward his destiny. He wrote about love, freedom, and the vast beauty of the Russian landscape, his words full of emotion and passion. His teachers quickly recognized his talent, encouraging him to share his poems with the world. At just 15, Pushkin's first poem was published, a moment that changed his life forever. The applause of his peers fueled his ambition. His love for poetry grew deeper, as did his dreams of revolutionizing Russian literature. He read Shakespeare, Byron, and Voltaire, their words lighting a fire inside him. He wasn't just writing poems, he was creating a voice for the people of Russia. Chapter 3. The Rise in St. Petersburg. The glittering city of St. Petersburg was unlike anything Pushkin had ever known. The grand palaces, the rushing rivers, and the vibrant culture of Russia's capital overwhelmed his senses. Here he would rise to fame, but his journey would be far from easy. In the salons of the aristocracy, Pushkin was the star. His poetry had captured the hearts of Russia's elite, and his name was on everyone's lips. He met other artists and intellectuals who shared his passion for freedom and change. But Pushkin was not content with fame alone. His words were powerful, and he knew it. He began writing poems that challenged the oppressive regime, calling for freedom of speech and justice. But the government was watching. Pushkin's revolutionary ideas put him in danger. His poems, filled with passion and defiance, caught the attention of the Tsar's spies. The authorities decided to silence him, exiling him to the countryside, far away from the city's influence. Chapter 4. Exile and Masterpieces. The rolling hills and quiet forests of the Russian countryside became Pushkin's new home, but exile could not silence his voice. It was here, away from the glamour of St. Petersburg, that Pushkin's pen became even mightier. His imagination soared as he drew inspiration from the simple lives of peasants and the raw beauty of nature. His greatest work, Eugene Onegin, was born during this time. A novel in verse? It told the story of a young aristocrat named Eugene, a man of privilege but lacking purpose. When Eugene meets the pure and romantic Tatiana, he rejects her love, only to realize too late that he has lost something precious. This tale of unfulfilled love and deep regret became a masterpiece, a reflection of Pushkin's own inner conflicts. But exile was not only a time of literary triumph. It was also a time of personal reflection. Alone in his quiet estate, Pushkin wrote one of his most heartfelt poems, I Loved You, where his tender yet melancholic words spoke of lost love and unspoken feelings. Let's enjoy this poem together. I loved you. I loved you. Perhaps love still lingers, deep in my soul, unquenched but low. But let it trouble you no longer. I do not wish to sadden you. I loved you in complete devotion, so tenderly, so truly too, as may God grant you to be loved by one who loves you as I do. Chapter 5. Love and Conflict. Despite the isolation of exile, fate brought love into Pushkin's life. Natalia Goncharova was unlike any woman he had ever known, stunning, graceful, and admired by all of high society. For Pushkin, she was a muse, and he pursued her with the same passion that he gave to his poetry. Their love story was filled with romance, but it wasn't without hardship. Natalia's beauty attracted many admirers, and Pushkin, already known for his fiery temper, became consumed with jealousy. Though deeply in love, his fears grew, especially when rumors about Natalia and a dashing French officer, Georges Dantes, spread through society. Pushkin's jealousy boiled over. He could no longer ignore the whispers. His pride was wounded, and his heart was torn. There was only one way to defend his honor: a duel. Chapter 6. The Duel. The sky was heavy with snow, the silence of the early morning broken only by the sound of footsteps on the frozen ground. Pushkin stood, face to face with Dantes, pistols in hand. The duel had been set. The air was thick with tension. As the two men took their positions, time seemed to slow. The signal was given, and they fired. A sharp crack echoed through the cold air, and Pushkin fell to the ground, clutching his side. The bullet had struck him with deadly accuracy. Pushkin was carried home, but the wound was too severe. For 2 days, he fought for his life, surrounded by loved ones. But on February 10, 1837, at just 37 years old, Aleksandr Pushkin, Russia's greatest poet, took his last breath. The news of his death spread like wildfire. The nation mourned the loss of its beloved poet. Thousands gathered in the streets, their hearts heavy with grief. Chapter 7. The Legacy of a Legend. Pushkin's death was the end of an era, but his words lived on. In the years that followed, his works became more than just poems or stories. They became the voice of Russia. He had given life to Russian literature, shaping its future and inspiring generations of writers to come. His masterpieces, from Eugene Onegin to The Bronze Horseman, captured the soul of a nation, mixing the elegance of European literature with the heart of Russian folklore. Through his words, Pushkin had woven a tapestry of Russian life, its joys, its sorrows, and its endless struggles. Statues were built in his honor, his face immortalized in stone. In schools across Russia, children recited his poetry, his legacy passed down from one generation to the next. And every year on June 6th, the world celebrated the birthday of the man who had changed literature forever. Chapter 8. Pushkin's Eternal Flame. More than a century has passed since Pushkin's tragic death, but his spirit remains alive in the hearts of readers worldwide. His works have transcended time, his voice still echoing in the pages of history. Musicians, artists, and filmmakers continue to draw inspiration from his life and his poetry, proving that true genius never fades. In Russia, he is more than just a poet. He is a symbol of identity, a beacon of freedom, and a reminder of the power of words. His poems, like I Loved You, still touch the hearts of those who read them, and his stories, full of beauty and passion, continue to captivate readers of all ages. Alexander Pushkin may have lived a short life, but his legacy will endure for eternity.